It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bench Talk 101. This week, we're joined by Tim Cullen, who's a fountain pen maker, to learn a little bit about something different to what we normally hear about from other people. So over to you, Tim, to give yourself a bit of an introduction and tell us how you got into fountain pen making.
Well, thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. And we had a little precursor of talking to a lot of your guys. It seemed like great guys. I was originally, working my full-time job. I wanted to learn to start being a cabinet maker. I went to woodworking school. I took classes at Cerritos College. I took classes at a couple other places in California. And I lived in Southern California, and it was a difficult place to have a workshop because, you have to have a lot of space, and in California, space comes at a premium and it comes at a cost. So I needed to find something that I could make in a very small area. And I found that I kind of fell into making pens. Originally, I had a local woodcraft shop, and I saw that guys were turning pens originally. So I decided, I'll give one a shot, and I did, and I kind of liked it. And like I said, I could make it in a very small area because my garage was taken up by Christmas ornaments and bicycles for the kids. So I had a small, like 10 by 10 spot in it. So I started making those, and really early on, I say probably like 2011, I got tired of it. I made probably 30 or 40 pens, and it just became boring because I couldn't make them look the way that I wanted them to. So I started researching, how to start making my own pens. And there was very few guys making, I would say a very handful, maybe 3 or 4 that I know of, Paul Rossi and my mentor, David Broadwell. So I reached out to David Broadwell, who is in Texas, and I asked him, hey, how can I get this started? And we spoke on a few occasions. So I started collecting the tools that I thought that would, I could use to make my own pens. And I started collecting metal lathes, and I started collecting mills, and I started collecting a lot of hand files and things like that. And I think I made my first custom pen somewhere in 2011. And I wish I would have taken pictures back then. When you start anything, things are rough. And I started just like anybody else and a lot of people that are still making pens today are using taps and dies. And I started out using a tap and die system where it's a small, tap and a die that cuts the threads for you. And then as things grew, I wasn't even happy with that. As things started to, progress, I wanted to start making all my own threads. I wanted to start making all my own metal pieces. So I started branching out, and I started buying, raw material. And then I bought a lathe that I can, learn to thread on and learn to multi-thread. Multi-threading is different than single thread because multi-threading is several leads going around the barrel to create a quicker on and off cap. So it just went from there. And I loved making wood pens. And I'm not and I was discussing with the guys, I'm not a traditional turner. I don't turn bowls. I don't turn candlesticks or anything like that, salt and pepper shakers. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not in my wheelhouse. I only basically use a wood lathe to shape the cap and barrel, and it's very minimal work. It's probably 5% of the entire pen making process. But I do use wood, and I use a lot of it, and I use a metal lathe to do all my work on wood mostly. So the metal lathe is probably, machining is about 75% of my pen making work. So anyway, that being said, things just started to take off from there. I started using all different types of metals, all different types of wood, all different types of acrylics, all different types of I mean, I would get into natural materials like horn and antler. I've made pens from buffalo horn, from elk antler. I've made pens from mammoth ivory. In fact, I have one right here that's recently done, and it's from my buddy Adrian. And that's cross-cut mammoth tusk. And the rest of it is Russian bog oak. And the ring started out as a flat piece of sterling silver. And I'll get into that even more as I go along. And this is all sterling silver. So as I went along, I wanted to do more and more and more things. And I wanted to accomplish more things. I wanted to be able to, you know, manipulate any kind of metal that I wanted. So I work with Damascus and mocha-megane and bronze, stainless, titanium. I've made titanium pens. I've made titanium and wood incorporated pens. I mix and match materials. And one of the things I was telling Shrenik was, as a pen maker, and especially, there's only a few of us, but as a pen maker, there's a lot of disciplines that go into just making a pen. It's not just you're a wood turner or you're a machinist, but you have to be, let's say, a wood turner, a machinist, a metalsmith, a jeweler, a hand engraver, because I do all my own hand engraving under the microscope. So you have to have a lot of disciplines, and it's taken me years and years of study. I've taken bronze casting classes. I've taken metalsmith and jeweler making classes. I've taken, you know, like general woodworking classes. So there's a lot, and of course, a lot of engraving, hand engraving classes, which in my opinion is one of the hardest arts to learn. So with all that being said, doing all that, you have the ability to create one-of-a-kind pieces that no one else in the world can make and no one else can get unless they come to you. I think I might be the only person in the world that engraves their own nibs. I hand engrave them. I don't send them out to get laser engraved with my logo. And let me show you what I'm talking about. I don't know if I can get it close enough. I don't know if you can see my engraved, but I hand engrave that. Now that's smaller than a dime, you know. And I also hand engraved the person's initial. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. And then my logo, which is the Hooligan Georgia logo. And then there are times, hold on, let me get you something. Let me show you something I should have brought it. I'll step away from just a second. Is that okay, guys?
Sure.
One of the things I'm working on right now is a custom barrel. I had a collector that said, you know, he has this ring and it has like an owl on it. And he goes, I want a pen with that same owl. So what I did is I copied that owl and I recreated it. And I cut it out of nickel silver and I created this copper tube and I soldered it together as an overlay. And then I engraved the tube to make it look like a tree. That's all hand engraved. Hours of work. So there's just so many disciplines that you can use. But as far as wood, and I know that you're a wood group, I love working with wood because there are so many different species. Like I said, this is my only pen, fountain pen that I own, and it's Kingwood. And I made this back in 2015, and I use it to do all of my work. When I do any of my COAs or anything like that, to this day, I've used it, and it's really beautiful wood. I love it. Kingwood is my favorite wood to make pens out of. But I use all different types of hardwoods: cocobolo, teak, ebony, African blackwood. Just to name a few. I was just showing Shrenik that I got this boxwood, English boxwood, that I'm going to start a pen with. And another thing that I used to do, and this might interest you guys, is I used to do a lot of historic pens. And historic pens, by what I mean by that is that the wood comes from historical places, either like a movie set or a historical building or a naval ship. So I've done pens with the tree wood from the Shawshank Redemption, and I've made pens from that. I've made pens from the movie set of Harry Potter at Christ Church in Oxford, England. That wood, I've gotten that wood. I've also made pens from the movie set of the Titanic. I do have some wood from the Field of Dreams movie site, and I'll be doing that pretty soon. Historic pens, I've done Gettysburg. I've done President Roosevelt's house. I've done a couple naval ships, the USS Missouri, the USS California. So I've done some historic wood stuff too. I'm getting ready to do this one. This one is just for a gift and for personal use only, but this is from the front door of Ellis Island, and it's very rare, and I don't think anybody else has it. So the process of making a wood pen is more difficult actually than making, let's say, like a celluloid pen or because the thing is with wood is, of course, it's porous, and in order to use wood, you have to line it. So let me show you this. So you see this green top here. Well, this green top extends actually all the way into here. So what I do is I bore out this piece of wood to accept the green acrylic. So what happens is when I drill this, none of the wood is exposed to the ink. None of the wood is exposed to the inside moisture or anything like that. It's only inside the acrylic. And then I epoxy this together. So then I can shape this wood, and what happens is that it looks like it's the entire barrel, but actually it's just fascia. And the same with the cap. Same with this cap. This cap is fully lined with acrylic or ebonite rubber. And what I do is these caps get very thin too. I mean, they come down paper thin. But what I'll do is I'll bore out this and I'll step it down in order to make this curvature. And then a sleeve will go in there that fits it just perfect, and I'll epoxy that in. So then the wood actually is just, like I said, like fascia. And as you can see right here, I don't know if you can see it, but it's all ebonite inside there. So you have to be, when you're making wood pens, you have to have very good tolerances, because when you don't want a lot of slop, a lot of play. You don't want it to move around a lot in there. You want it to be able to have a snug fit, and the glue surface, just like, when you work wood, but this is epoxy. So you want the epoxy to have something to adhere to. And sometimes if you get it too sloppy, of course, the epoxy is not going to reach all the surfaces. And that's the most difficult thing to do when you're working with wood and trying to make wood pens, is to make sure that your bearing surface is tight enough but not too loose, in order to make your epoxy really hold on to your wood. Anyway, so once that's done, and once I get all this done, I'll take it over to my metal lathe, and I'll put it back into my metal lathe, and then I'll thread this. And like I said, I thread multi-start thread, and I use a 1950s Craftsman Atlas lathe, not Craftsman, just Atlas lathe. And I'll thread the barrel, and my thread pitch is 36 TPI, but it's 4 leads. And what that does is it makes the cap thread on much faster. Now I still need to take this down, but if you look, if this was a single thread, it would take several revolutions, but this lets 1, 2, 2.5. 2.5 revolutions to get this off. So what that does is that, because pen people, they want to get the cap off. They don't want to sit there and be turning forever. So that is one of the things that it's important that your cap not take forever to get off your pen. So then once I've threaded it, then of course I'm going to bore the inside to fit the converter or the ink pocket or anything that I want. And then I have to thread the inside for a section that holds the nib. The only thing that I don't make on a fountain pen is the nib, and I don't make the converter. If I had to do that, it would take me forever, and there's already no money in men making pens. I think most people will tell you that. No one's going to get rich doing it. But if I had to do that, it would take forever, because nib making is it's a whole nother, rabbit hole to go down. So everything on that pen, except for the nib and the converter, is made here in my shop, including the metal parts that you see here. The finials are all made from solid stock. And this is copper, beryllium copper. And I do all my own threading. And that's a finial, and the clip will come out of that. And I do all my own rings, and you'll see this here. And everything is, like I said, is made from solid bar stock. So one of the things natural materials is one of the things that I'm known for. And right now what I'm doing is a limited edition series using mammoth tooth. And this is mammoth tooth. And I've got a bunch of different pens. I'm making 18 of them, and each one of them has a mammoth tooth barrel. And the way I did this is very similar to the way I do wood pens. And this is a great example, because I'm going to be able to show you how this works. You can see this is lined. The mammoth tooth is a very thin fascia, and it's lined with the same acrylic, and it runs entirely through the entire piece of mammoth tooth. Then what I do is I thread the end of this, and I thread this part, and that gives me the ability to create the barrel. But that makes your barrel when you want to use natural materials, because you couldn't thread this, it wouldn't stand up. If mammoth tooth was by itself, it'd break in half and crack and shatter, because it's porcelain basically with a lot of other junk in it. I don't know, I'm not a scientist. But you have to have it fortified. You have to have it, to where it's stable, and it needs to, be lined. Otherwise, it'll break and crack, and also won't accept threads. So also, and this is Mokume Gane, making my own clips. And it's funny because the most, excuse me, the most unimportant part of the pen is actually the hardest part of the pen, which is funny. It makes no sense, but the clip making process is very difficult. This entire clip unit was all handmade. So what I do, and I use manual machines, but I use a lot of files. So what I'll do is I'll cut this out of a Mokume blank. And then I'll mill part of it down to create this hump for like a stopper. And then this back to receive the ring that I make as well. Then once I make the ring and I fit it to the cap, I solder these two pieces together. And then I do the finish work, which this one hasn't been finished yet. But it's a long process, and it's probably, some of my clips probably take longer than some other makers' entire pen. I mean, this is a couple of hours of work. I mean, just to do this clip. And clip making is one of the things I'm known for. A lot of makers don't make their own clips. It's a lot of, there's just like, when you do woodworking, if you want to get into specialties, the more that you get into, the more machinery or the more hand tools that you need, and it becomes, is it cost effective for you? And I've developed things over the years where I'm able to make them pretty easily using just mills and files and the acetylene torch. So basically, I just took you through the steps of making a fountain pen. Now, as far as like, if you got into materials, like I said, I make them out of wood. I make them out of metal. I've worked in titanium. I've worked in Mokume. I've worked in Damascus. I worked in, I even made clips out of meteorite. So there's the sky's the limit. And when, like I said, when you're a pen maker, the great thing about it is you could use all different types of materials. The sky's the limit. If you could put it on a pen, you can use it, as long as it's durable enough to withstand wear and tear. Another thing that I'm doing too, and I wanted to show you this. This is an overlay. So what I've done is this is a repeating pattern. I think it's some type of Arabic pattern, but I've cut each one of these out with a jeweler saw. And what I'll do next is I'll round this, I'll turn it round, and I'll solder it together once I have all the voids cut out. And this is sterling silver. And what that'll do is that'll wrap around a barrel, and you'll get that kind of effect where you have a three-dimensional design. And it was actually quite popular. And one of the gentlemen who taught me how to do it was actually from the UK. His name was Henry Simple. Look him up. He's some of the most beautiful overlays ever done in the world was done by him. He passed away a few years ago, but I was glad to get to know him, and he taught me some of his secrets. But he passed away a few years ago, but he was well regarded as probably the most premier overlay maker in the world. So if I make a one-piece clip, and I hope I'm not boring you guys, so I'm sorry. Here's Damascus. Now all my clips start out as just like a knife blank. And what I do is I drill, and then I mark the shape here, and then I'll take it to my metal bandsaw and cut it out by hand. And then the rest of the work is all done by hand on a vise with files. And then once that's done, you can't just bend Damascus steel. It will crack, it will break. It's just too hard, and the layers will start to separate. So what I have to do is I have to heat this up red hot and put it in a vise, and I have to be able to bend it, but I have to bend it where it's not too much of an arc and too little of an arc. I have to get the right bend, and over the years, I've learned how to do that. Then once you do that, then you have to heat treat it to get the spring. So I go through a heat treating process just like a knife maker, and I'll heat treat it, and I'll dunk it in the acid, and then I'll etch it, and then I'll put a finish on it just like a Damascus knife maker would, and that will become the clip. I don't have any examples because they're all been shipped away today. But again, there's so many different types of materials, you can mix and match with. I mix and match wood. I mix with metal, with horn, with antler, with acrylic, with celluloid, with ebonite, and it's a great thing because there's, like I said, it's not a one-dimensional art. There's so many arts that come into it, and that's what I like about it the most. I think Shrenik, is there any other?
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit more about your engraving process?
So that's actually a great thing. So a couple of years back, I wanted to have a pen engraved, and I sent it to who ended up being my instructor, Ray Cover, to have it engraved. Well, engraving's not cheap. I don't know if anybody here has had any engraving done on any of their stuff, but it can get expensive. So I sent it to him, and absolutely wonderful job. But when I got the bill, I was quite shocked. So I decided, you know what? I wanted every part of my pen to be my own. So I decided to take up engraving. That is no cheap undertaking, though, because engraving, if you're familiar with engraving, hand engraving equipment, it's not cheap. Just to get started, it's several $1,000s. And then, you want to take classes because it's a very difficult art to learn just by reading books. I mean, there's nothing like hands-on class instruction. So I went to Missouri to Ray Cover's Fine Art School of Engraving, and I took my first basic course about 5 years ago. And I love it. It's one of the most dehumanizing arts because it's so difficult. It's a very, very difficult art to be proficient at. It takes years and years of practice. Once you think you're good, you're not. And every day I struggle to get better and better and better, but I practice a lot. And that's the one thing that in order to be a good engraver, you've got to put the time in. So engraving is the art of putting a single point to a piece of metal and then carving out a channel in that metal. And I use a power assist engraver and a microscope most of the time. And I'm able to, monogram things. I'm able to, do my logos. I'm able to do, like I said, I did this entire thing. I engraved this owl, and this is about the size of a nickel, maybe. And then exactly all the wood style engraving. I wouldn't consider myself a traditional engraver that engraves guns or knives or things like that, because pens are not, they're not traditionally engraved, a lot of them. So whatever I do on a pen is, it's up to me. So I've engraved all types of things on pens. I've engraved traditional Western scroll that they've engraved on guns, or I've engraved flowers, I've engraved music notes, I engrave all types of things on pens, because most of my work is commission work. So people will ask for certain things. I've had a lady that wanted a pen to represent her favorite Beatles song. So I wrote the lyrics, I engraved the lyrics on the pen, on the metal parts of the pen. I've had people that she missed her brother, so she wanted me to engrave the symbol for twins because they were fraternal twins, and I engraved that. On the Shawshank Redemption pen, I engraved the actor going through the tunnel on the clip. So there's the sky's the limit on the things that you can do. And what it does, though, is it gives me the ability to personalize a pen and also make the pen have a story. If you look at the pen and you see that it has, an owl on it, there's a story there. Why does it have an owl on it? Or if you see the Shawshank Redemption pen, you'll see that it has the jeweler's hammer or the rock hammer on the finial, and then the Andy Dufresne, trying to get out of the tunnel. There's a story there, and I think hand engraving helps with the story. It kind of helps bring the pen to life if the pen has a theme. And with that, I think that having all that ability gives you the opportunity to take jobs that no one else can take. I get a lot of people that say, I got a guy just recently, he's just made the fire chief. He's going to be the fire chief of his department. So he goes, can you put a Maltese cross on this pen? And I want to put my badge number, and I want to put, my department's information on it or something like that. And I said, yeah, I can do that. And I'm just about ready to start a job like that. On these pens, these mammoth tooth pens, every one is going to be hand numbered on the back. So 0 to 18 or 17. And then on the top, I'm going to engrave a woolly mammoth on the top. So it'll basically tell the story of the pen, and people know that it's a limited edition without even having to, talk to the owner. And that's one of the good things about engraving, is that you can personalize things. It makes things look custom and beautiful. It's like I said, it's just like the entire art. You have to keep up on it. As a pen maker, you have to continuously do it, because all these skills they'll erode, and you've got to keep up on it. And by engraving every day, by making pens every day, I keep up on my skills. Anyway, I hope that's, if there's any other avenues of information that you want me to share.
Well, thanks, Tim. I think that there's other people who've got things they want to hear about, so we'll move over to questions. So if
was that
anyone
good
has,
episode? Did I give a lot of information?
yeah, you did. Thank you. I think
I didn't miss anybody, Chester.
So yeah, the way we
walking around, I saw him feeding his dog just a minute ago.
That was a cat.
Oh.
So if anyone hasn't joined us before, if you want to ask a question to Tim, you pop your name in the chat, and I'll ask you to unmute and ask a question. So our first one up is Chester. So he's fed his cat now, he'll talk.
Tim, can you hear me all right? Am I unmuted?
I can hear you.
There are 1,000 questions that could be asked after that presentation. Presentation was great. You gave a nice wide variety of all the different skill sets required that you're practicing. And I have to say, your work is beautiful. I've seen it before today. I had seen it and got excited about it. The couple of questions I have about, one is that you said that you didn't like the idea of using a tap and die to thread.
I do not.
And that you were doing hand threading. So are you using thread chasers on a slow lathe, or what is it that how do you do that portion?
I use I have two metal lathes, and I cut all the threads to my pen on one lathe, and I cut all my metal threads on another. I use a process of I cut the threads, each individual thread. I don't chase with a lathe. I cut to fit the cap. So basically, I'll cut the threads on this, and I'll cut the threads by hand. So basically what I'm doing is I'm setting the lathe at a certain point to where it's ready to engage. And it's like you start at 0 and then you work your way in to maybe 20 thousandths. Okay, are you following me?
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll set the lathe to start at 0, and then I'll take my first pass, and it'll stop at a certain point. And what I have to do is I have to bring it back to my original start place, and then I'll set it back to 0, and I'll do the second lead, and I'll do the third lead, and I'll do the fourth lead. And then I'll repeat that process until I get it to about 20 to 22 thousandths or whatever is and then of course I'll have, and what I do is I use like test caps that I have sitting around, and I'll go, all right, that fits good, and it's nice and tight. It's not loose. So once that's done and the thread is clean, because I make sure I use like a magnifying glass to make sure that the thread is clean, I'll start the cap and I'll do the cap, but I use the barrel as my test fit piece, because those are the two pieces that are going to come in common with each other. These are the two, this is the male and female to this pen.
Gotcha.
But it's a different process. Go ahead.
What actual cutter are you using for the threading? Are you using a tap and die, a hand tap and die, or?
I can go get the cutters that I use. They're basically just high-speed steel that I grind into a 60 degree for the barrel. And what it goes is it runs along like any other lathe, but it runs along with when I have a quick change threading box that's on my lathe. And it'll give me, like, I set it to 9 TPI, whatever.
Yeah.
So once it's set there, then I pick a speed, and usually for multi-speeds, I pick a pretty slow speed. So because you've got to disengage really quick. If you don't, you're going to run right into it. So I don't do the thing where a lot of guys I've seen, they do it by hand, where they'll just turn the whole thing and it'll be slow rotation and they'll turn it. But I engage with the motor. I'm full speed. I'm cutting threads using the motor, using power. So I'm using, for the external threads, I'll use a 60 degree 1/4 inch or 5/8 inch, which I grind myself on a grinder to do the male threads. On the female threads, I use what's called a boring bar with a 60 degree, because it needs to get inside there.
Right.
And then I'll do the same thing. I'll keep doing successive passes, each one lead at a time. So first lead, 1, 0. Second lead, 0. Third lead, 0. And then all the way to 22 thousandths, basically, until I get the fit that I want.
Fantastic.
I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it absolutely does. You've really given a great presentation. So don't doubt yourself. The other thing you said was that the copper sleeve that you made, you said that you start off with all solid bar stock. Are you not starting that with an open already an extruded pipe, or you're doing solid and boring it?
It depends. Like I have titanium, I have copper that are pipe, but I do them if it depends. If I can find a pipe diameter that will work, because obviously it's going to have an external diameter.
Right.
So if I can't find one that's going to work, I have to make it from solid stock. So I'll have to turn the outside diameter and then bore the inside diameter. It depends. Very rarely do I use tubes because my pens will vary in width and diameter, and you're never going to get a pipe that's going to be the diameter that you need.
Right.
So on occasions I will. Excuse me?
I'm so a little surprised you don't do the internal bore size first and then go back and do your external, because then you can fit it on an arbor and control it. But so you're doing the outside and then boring it on a lathe?
Absolutely. Because
Wow.
what I do is I'll do the outside diameter and get it to where I want it to be. And then I'll stick it in my ER32 chuck. And what I'll do is I'll counterbore the end. So when I come out, I don't blow up the whole damn place. And then I'll go from another side and I'll start boring it. And what I'll do is I'll take a boring bar and I'll bore that inside diameter to where I get to the thickness. And usually it's 20 to 25 thousandths thick wall, because you don't want it to be super heavy, but you also want to be able to engrave and put things on it, because if you don't have enough thickness surface, then you won't be able to engrave it or inlay it or add something to it. But there are times, I mean, I have some titanium tube stock over there that I found on eBay on a good deal, and I bought it because it was 15 millimeters, and 15 millimeters is a common size that I use. But let's say that I'm making a larger pen and somebody wants, one of my monster pens and they want an overlay on it. They don't make tube stock like that commonly. So, I have to make it myself, and I can. It's not a problem.
Well, I have to pass this on to other people, but I have to say it was thoroughly interesting, and there's plenty more that you could probably do 2 or 3 talks. But I was glad because you kept saying earlier that there were all these skill sets or I forgot the term you used that were required. And finally, you brought up the word art, because I really have to think that that is another set that you have as an artist, because you have to have a good eye and plenty of patience. So congratulations, a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Chester. Over to you, Matthias.
And I too say thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. Whenever we get someone in here who talks beyond the conventional woodworking, it always opens a plethora of avenues of interest. So thank you very much for your contribution to that, for starters. And I'd like to latch on to what Chester ended with. So the fact that you mentioned all the various skill sets you need to be able to do the work you do. And this might be kind of a stupid question, but is there one or some that stick out as particularly interesting and agreeable to you? And are there some that are more towards the chore end of the spectrum?
Yes, that's a great question. It's not a dumb question. That's actually a very good question. When I first started engraving, that used to stress me out the most. I would lament over getting something done, and I would tell my wife, I got to go do this. And today she reminds me that what took me a week 3 years ago takes me a couple of hours now.
Yeah.
I would stress over. There was a time where I was thinking, I'm not going to engrave my own nibs, because if I slip a graver on a gold nib, I just wasted $125.
Yeah.
So I engrave gold nibs all the time now, and it's just become a commonplace for me. So there are things that now I enjoy doing. Everything is like a battle. Everything is even with woodworking.
Yeah.
Everything becomes difficult when everybody starts to learn hand dovetailing, and they first get that first saw in there and they try to put those dovetails together, because I've done it. And they try to fit that dovetails and they're wondering what the hell happened. How come this looks like these two never even met before? It's just a process. It becomes, the more you do it, the more in tune you are with what you're doing, and the more you become more efficient at it, and you become better at it, and you don't look to shy away from it, but you look to charge towards it.
Yeah.
And I think with me, the things that used to come hard to me, that come easy to me, are the things I want to do. The things that are always kind of easy, like sanding and finishing, those are boring things. Those are things I don't like to do, but those are the things that make the pen really come alive.
Yeah.
which is hilarious.
Mhm.
I'm more of a journey person than a finished person. I like to take something from nothing, to take this from 2 square pieces and to take it into, you know, having basically this. I mean, at one time, this was just a square block of mammoth tooth.
Yeah.
This was a square block of wood. These were flat sheets of silver.
Mhm.
And the fun part about it is each one of these, getting them to a certain point is the fun part about it. And then mating them all together and making something out of, it's like basically cooking. You've got all these ingredients and then you're putting them together. Now there are some parts of it that are funner than others.
Yeah.
When it comes to soldering, I don't really like to do it, but I know that it's a means to an end. It's part of it.
Yeah.
It's not the most artistic thing, but it is a skill, and it's a skill that is used by jewelers and for years and years, and it's a great skill to have, but it's not exciting.
No.
Maybe it is for some people, but for me, it's not exciting. And then the finishing process is not, I don't like to stand at the buffer for 3 hours, but I commonly find myself resanding and rebuffing and resanding and rebuffing and resanding and rebuffing until I get to the finish that I want.
Yeah.
Is that fun? No, not really. But I enjoy threading. I enjoy shaping clips. In fact, clip work is my favorite thing to do until I got to solder it. I enjoy threading and I enjoy engraving. But yeah, it's just like, if you're a woodworker, do you enjoy, you know, I don't know. I mean,
no.
Yeah, there are certain things I like I said early in the talk, I'm not a traditional turner. I don't like to turn bowls. I don't like to turn, you know, things. It's not my thing, but there are many people that do beautiful things on a lathe.
Yeah.
I'm just not that person.
One more question to follow on from this. I mean, I can see you have a plenitude of challenges to keep you occupied and happy, but as it were, in the moments before you go to sleep at night, do you see things on the horizon that you might be wanting to move towards, or do something else, or yet more skills to add, or something completely different? Are you looking for further journeys?
I always tell my wife, and my wife will tell me, Tim, it's time to shut it off. We're going to bed. Because my mind races, and
Yeah.
I think not unlike a lot of you guys, and I've talked to Shrenik, and his mind races as well, because we have the same disease. All of us have that same disease.
Mm-hmm.
If you're comfortable, and let me make it for instance, a lot of people won't share their processes with other makers. I will tell you exactly how I do it.
Yeah.
People are always messaging me saying, how did you do that? Can you help me do this? What did you do to this? You know why I do it? And for the same reason you guys should all do it. Because if you tell everybody how you do it, that'll try to keep you from them chasing you.
Yeah.
You need to keep moving forward. You need to keep getting better, keep trying to, you know, perfect what you're doing, keep doing more and more and more, because you want your work to be the best it can be. So I don't shy away. I don't have secrets. I don't, you know, there's not a process that I think, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want them to do this. I'll share them openly with people. I'll share them openly all the time, because what it does is it keeps making me want to do better, and, you know, keep reaching out to do more things, like, you know, inlaying this, or, you know, there's a lot of things that I haven't done yet. I thought about going into enameling, but you know, I'm not sure that I'm going to do that.
No.
But there's so many other things that you know you can do. Sky's the limit, basically.
Exactly. Well, thank you ever so much. This was truly fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks. You have a nice night.
Cheers.
Thanks, Matthias. Over to Mr. Tussaud.
With it. he likes to mispronounce my name a lot. Tim, thanks a lot. Appreciate the talk, man. It was what I was able to catch of it was fascinating. Unfortunately, I had a work call in the middle, so I did miss a few things in there. I was going to ask a question about threading, but I think Chester covered most of that. And thank you for the detail on that. I've turned a few pens, not a ton, by no means an expert turner, but I looked up a lot of your work, and it's amazing. Did
Thank
you
you.
cover what your favorite finish is for your pens, or what you tend to use?
I don't ever use like a hard finish. If most of my wood is stabilized, what I mean by stabilized is and a lot of, if you guys, some pen turners and knife makers, stabilization is taking and making sure the wood is dry and then putting it into a chamber where you have like a resin, like a polymer resin, and it basically sucks the resin through the pores of the wood and gives it a more plasticky, more stabilized, structure. So most of the wood that I use, including this piece right here, has been stabilized. That makes the pen less susceptible to moisture, to the elements and things like that. So I don't really need a hard finish. In fact, in my opinion, even in the furniture I've made, I don't like hard finishes. What's the hell to have the sense of having wood grain if you can't feel it? You know what I'm saying?
I do.
When you have natural material, you want to feel the texture. You want to feel, hey, this is 10,000 years old and I'm touching it. There was a woolly mammoth walking around eating leaves with this damn tooth, and it's so cool. Or, there was somebody that walked through this door at one time and touched this very door. You want to be able to feel what you have, because pens are a very tactile thing. And just as some furnitures are. I mean, I love chair makers. In fact, if I one day I used to, that's what I always wanted to be, is I wanted to be a chair maker. And I think with chair makers, the whole thing is when you sit down in a chair, you grab the arms or whatever, you can feel the handwork in some of those chairs. I think that those are one of the most beautiful. The same with hand plane makers. I think wood hand plane makers or metal plane makers, the same thing is you can touch and you can feel the quality in certain things. And when you're putting finishes on and you're hiding things, or to me, that's just not I'd rather leave something bare wood and just put wax or like an oil finish on it, to me. And then if you just instruct the people, hey, put a wax coat on it every once in a while, because in your hand, it feels better. Don't you agree? I mean, so I hope
Most definitely. I prefer a more natural finish on those. I do.
Yeah, I think most people do. I used to use Watkins Danish oil years ago when it was the original finish, and I loved using that stuff. I don't know what happened to it, but in California it went away really quick. So
yeah, well, once again, great talk. And in the course of looking up your work and everything, and just going back and refamiliarizing myself, having seen it a year or so ago, I also wanted to say thank you, because I also came across your charity work that you do there. Your what is it, the Georgia Beat Cancer?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that. I think that's just admirable. So appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Cheers, Chris. I'd completely forgotten to hint at that. Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about your charity work before we get on to the next question?
Yeah, I had a situation where my first cancer pen, I was a sheriff's deputy. I retired in 2016 as a sheriff's sergeant, and I had some friends that were going through cancer, and I wanted to lift their spirits by making them a pen and saying, hey, you can beat this. And then it kind of grew from there, and I started making them, and I made a website to talk about it. And I've made them for people that I went to high school with. I've made them for family members. I've made them for people who I used to work with. And it's just been, it's a rewarding, but also it's a very sad thing, because not everyone that I gave a pen to has, that are still using it, obviously. I've taken a break from it last couple of months because I had a situation where somebody, it took me by surprise that they didn't make it. And I told my wife, I don't know if I could do this anymore. Sometimes it's very, very sad, because you're trying to uplift these spirits, but cancer is a horrible thing, and it'll take family members and friends. It doesn't care what race or what creed you are or how much money you have. Cancer will take you. It doesn't matter. I'm of course overstating the obvious, but I'm trying to make a point. With cancer, it does not discriminate. And I've seen young people die from it. And I've seen, like my closest family members pass away. I had an uncle pass away from it this year. And I had a friend that I worked with, his son passed away from it, complications to it. And my aunt passed away. My father passed away from brain cancer. So it's a disease that I've had a lot of experience dealing with. And I just thought that, if I could do something to give back, and I've made probably, I don't know, over the last 10 or 12 years, a couple hundred of them, maybe not that many, but, if I could make them all the time and that's all I had to do, and I didn't have to worry about, funding my projects and things like that, I would do that. But, at some point, like I said, it's like working in any job where there's a lot of stress. Eventually it gets to you. If something happens that you're not expecting. So it's a difficult thing too, but I do enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. A really heartfelt story, really. I'm going to move on to Scott. Here's the next question.
Evening, Tim.
Hey,
that was fascinating. I loved it. A couple of things that spiked my interest, apart from the whole everything about the pens, was the materials.
Yes.
I've been doing a lot more metal working. I'm a joiner to trade. I've worked wood my whole life, but I've been doing a lot of metal working recently. And I was interested in, you mentioned you used acids for etching Damascus.
I sure do.
Ferric chloride or other acids?
I use ferric chloride.
What's the learning curve like on that? Because I've never tried it. Obviously, you have to file the learning curve. So obviously, the length of time it's in the acid, it's going to etch deeper.
It's going to depend on...
It's just trial and error.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the look that you're going for. So some steels are made where you can just flash it, which means just dip it really quick and come up and it'll give you a pattern.
Yeah.
And then there are some that you need to etch to have that terrain-like look.
Yeah.
You want the highs and lows. So then you have to etch it longer. And then and then sometimes what I'll do, and then I've learned from other makers, is that you'll take a fine sandpaper and then you'll sand it down, re-etch it, keep doing that until you get that look that you want. Because what you're basically doing is you're taking away the soft layer and leaving the hard layer, basically.
And then polishing the kind of nickel on top.
Excuse me, sir?
It's the kind of nickel part of it that you're actually polishing out. So it's the high parts are nickel. I don't think they etch as deep as the steel does.
I'll steel wool it with very fine steel wool, but I won't polish it on, say, like a, unless I'm looking for a shiny type look, which I rarely do. Basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring out the very pattern that is on there.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of different types of patterns and things that I use. And I get my Damascus from a guy that works, I think, up in Michigan. His name is Randy Haas, and he makes it all by hand.
Yeah.
And then I get my Mokame from another guy that's up, I think, Minnesota, and his name is Mike Sakamar. And they've got several years of experience making it. Now, my friend locally, my buddy here locally, Adrian Britt, he started to do some forge work, and he's going to start learning how to do some. And last week we went over and made some Mokame, and we were quite surprised that we were able to make the Mokame Gane. But the other guy talked about one of the things that say, is there anything that you like or don't like doing? I don't particularly care about working a lot in Damascus. A lot of people like it though. They love working. They love having Damascus on their pen. For some reason, it's just, I'd rather engrave, or Mokame Gane is my actual favorite metal to work on for pens. I think it looks great.
And do you darken the etch using coffee or anything? Have you tried that?
People have used coffee. People have used vinegar. I've seen people use bluing fluid.
Yeah.
To blue the surface and then to try to get those areas where it may be dull or patchy, and use bluing fluid to kind of bring that out. So there's a lot of different. Excuse me.
Just to bring out the contrast.
I'm sorry.
To bring out the contrast.
Yes, bring out the contrast. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. People have mixed vinegar with their ferric chloride. They said that maybe works better. So there's a lot of different things that you can do.
I've not tried it yet, but it is something I will try at some point. And again, it's something that, like you say, you try it for seconds or like and increase that and keep like washing it off and then trying it and just till you get the right depth of etch that you want on it. And it's obviously just something that you just have to try. I have to bite the bullet at some point and actually do it.
Yeah, making Damascus clips is a very, very, very hard process because you've got to basically heat treat it after you get it to where, well, if you don't get it sitting perfectly on your cap and you go to heat treat it, you got to start over.
Yep.
So, and then etching and getting that finish that you're looking for is sometimes can be hours and hours and hours of work. Like I said, I think I said it earlier, some of my clips take longer than some of other people's entire pens.
Yep.
Because there's so much detail and so much work involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions. Cheers. Thanks. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. I think we're on to Richard Hughes. Where is he? There we go.
Yeah. Good evening, Tim, and thanks for telling us about your work. A couple of questions about the threading. Could you give me an idea of what speed you run the lathe at for cutting your threads?
Oh, it just depends because certain thread pitches will run faster than others. I don't know exactly what speed. It's not running more than a couple hundred RPMs. I'm not running at 1,000, or 1,500 or maybe 200 or 300 RPMs. But let's say like if I'm doing a 3/8 thread, and this is all imperial, it'll run slower than if I run a wider thread. So let's say typically a 9 TPI thread will run faster because it's a wider thread. But if you're doing 4 of them together, it's not. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you're taking a coarse thread and you're making it a fine thread. So it's going to run a little faster because it's covering, there's a lot of distance between the turns, between the arcs.
Yeah.
Where the arcs on a 40 TPI is going to run slower because it's turning closer together. Your tolerances are closer on a 40 TPI than they are on a 9 TPI. But I'm using a 9 TPI and I'm using them in succession 4 times. So they're going to run faster, even at a slower speed than if a 3/8 40 would be. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, and in between passes, do you go backwards on the motor, or do you disengage and spin back and use
disengage every time? I don't back things up. When it goes one way, I pull out. I disengage the thread lock, and I roll it back. I take my adjuster and I put it right back, or I put it a couple thousand to 100,000 next, and then I do the next pass.
Yeah,
because I don't want to take the chance of something going one way and then messing up going the other.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because
yes.
what has to happen is you have to shut that lathe off and then you have to reverse it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's the better way to go, I think. Yeah. Is your lathe a miniature lathe or
no.
Or is it no?
No, it's my Atlas lathe is a 45-inch bed. 10. It's called a quick change 45. It's a 10-inch swing, and my South Bend lathe is also a 10-inch, but it's a 50-inch bed.
Okay, so they're quite large machines for a small workpiece. Yeah.
Well, they're vintage machines. They were made in America. Both of them were made in America years ago. And I find that, a lot of the newer machines don't meet what I like to do. It's like the difference if you're a car nut, okay? You're not going to work on you're not going to soup up your 2019 Ford Escort, but you're going to work on your 1966 Chevelle or your Austin Healey or your, because those are the days when things were more manual and you can work on them and they, you can get more of an idea. So working on the modern lathes, everything is set there. That's true. But I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. On to, I believe, Darren.
Hi, Tim. Good to
Hey.
see you. I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, what's going on?
I've been trying to keep busy.
I didn't know you were part of this group.
Yeah, I saw your post on Facebook, and I figured I'd take the chance to find a new group and to see you in action again.
Thank you.
I don't know if you covered it earlier. My question's more to a specific material because I'm considering picking up some mammoth myself to work with. Do you find that it works well with standard tools, or do you need special? Do you do anything special to actually turn the mammoth tooth?
I do. So somebody told me their secret, and but they said that they did kit pens. But one of the things that you need to do when you're turning mammoth tooth is you need to make sure that this outside is fortified when you're boring it. If not, you take the chance of it shattering. There's a lot of different methods, but I'll tell you my method, and it's real simple. I still have it in a 3/4 by 3/4 square block when I do this. And I take a paper plate, because paper plate is almost like cardboard, kind of. It's a really thick stock paper. So what I do is I glue all the way around. So I basically create walls around that mammoth tooth. Okay. And then I stick it in a 4-jaw chuck. So what'll happen is but when I'm boring it, whether I'm using a very, very sharp high-speed steel or I'm using a carbide bit, what'll happen is if it does separate, it's going to separate but still be glued to the internal paper and it's not going to move. See what I'm saying? So then it's stabilized, it's fortified by that outside layer. So once that's done, the next thing that I'll do is I'll bore it to the inside diameter that I need to run my sleeve in. And then when I run my sleeve in there, I'll epoxy that in there without turning the paper off, without, and then once it's dry, I can put it between centers. And first thing I do is take down the ends, the edges, because as you know, and you're very familiar with this, anytime you're turning a square thing with a metal lathe, it's going to go chip, 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 chip on those square edges, correct?
Yes.
So what do you want to do is you want to kind of round that over. So what I do is I take a small belt sander that I have and I take down the edges to where I get them to where it's kind of like almost a round, but not really. Now there's a lot of dust involved, so you want to wear a mask. And then I use like a carbide bit, just because I can, it'll high speed steel. You can use high speed steel, but it'll dull fast, but I use a carbide bit. And what I do is I'm just taking it down little by little by little by little. And you don't want to go super fast because then again, you're going to tear out. So little by little on slow speed. And I just take it, and I don't take big passes, because if you do, then you take the chance of just ripping the thing apart. So then what I do is once I get it down to a good shape, round within the diameter that I have, then I'll put it on the wood lathe just between centers. And then I'll take some really heavy sandpaper and work my way down. The thing is, though, is it's a natural material. So it's going to have soft areas in between hard areas. So if you're sanding with a piece of hand, your palm is not going to be straight and flat, right? So what I do is I take a rubber eraser. Let me see if I got it. I take this rubber eraser. So basically what that acts as is your planisher. It's a flat surface. Okay. And I put my sandpaper around that and I sand it like this. So basically it's getting it to be a flat surface. These are things that I've just developed over the years. So then what happens is that you don't create you're going to get pits and valleys anyway, but you don't create a major pit and valley area. And then it'll come out more flat and you'll be able to dimension it the way that you want. Hope that answers your question.
So basically solid carbide, not insert, but solid carbide bits are good for cutting it rough, and then down to final.
Yeah, the kind that you can take on and off. And for drilling it, you can use a real sharp high-speed steel, but I use a 1/2 inch. Usually I use a 1/2 inch to go through carbide bit, and it works pretty well. But what you want to do though is you want to pre-drill one side and then go back to the other side. Do you see what I'm saying? Because if you come out of there and you're coming out of there too hard, you're going to blow it out. Another thing to realize too is when you're turning it down, because I'm going to have, when I sleeve it with extra. You see what I'm saying? So I can put it between two centers. I glue a temporary ring there. And the reason that I do that is that acts as a stop. So it's like woodworking on a router. It's like a sacrificial thing against the router because you don't want the tear out at the end. So then that'll stop from the tear out happening, and you just CA glue it. And once you're done, you could turn it off.
Good. Excellent. I appreciate it. I wish I'd have caught here earlier, but I'm glad I got to hear most of this. It was good seeing you again.
No, you too, my friend.
Thank you, Darren. Great to see you join us. Over to you, Will.
Hey folks, how you doing? Tim, this is amazing. I have a couple of questions. And the first one I said is the historic materials. How do you come by such a vast variety?
You know, when I first started pen making, I was in this historic group with my buddy Jason Olson. And we used to go charging for all kinds of things. We'd go on eBay, we were in the original groups and things like that. So we got a hold of, people would, let's take, for instance, the Shawshank thing. I know the owner of the family farm that the film was made at. His name's Dan Dees. And when that movie is over, that tree eventually died and they had to cut it down. So it started out as a small thing, and eventually he started posting things on Facebook, and a bunch of us bought some of it. The same thing with everything else, like Christchurch. There was a guy in England somewhere that said, hey, they're redoing Christchurch. I've got the floor out of it. When they, that's how it happens. It was either somebody's refurbishing the building and someone goes over there and says, I'll buy this wood off you. I can remember my buddies, we approached the USS Iowa and we got wood from that ship. They sold the original decking to that ship, and things like that. So that's how it was done. So you just meet guys and regionally, and this guy's over in England, this guy's over in somewhere in like California, and this guy's in Canada, and they're going to grab these things, and then they put it out, and that's how it happened.
Okay. Just have to build up your network, eh?
Well, there have been times where I've been approached by people when I did the pens for Houdini's house. That guy approached me and said, hey, I want to do this project using the wood from Houdini's house in New York City. Now, he hasn't sold any of that wood. That wood has been, kept under wraps, and he's not going to sell it to anybody. But I did a few pens using Houdini's house wood. And there's some other things. I know a couple of people that make pens, and they've made deals with Fender wood and Leo Fender, and or they've made deals with the Titanic movie set. And sometimes you get lucky and you'll get a piece. Sometimes you won't.
Cool. So, speaking of Lutheries, I've made a few guitars. I'm not great at it yet, but you were just mentioning how you use the razors wrapped in sanding paper. Have you ever used the erasers Luther's use? They go like up to 2,000, 5,000 grit. You got them? That's the one.
Yeah.
All right.
Like I said, when you're a pen maker and you're a person that shares all your knowledge or something, you're always looking for things. You're always looking for an edge. So yeah.
But last week I made this. It's a kit, of course. That's the first thing. It's actually a very thick carpenter's pencil. And then I made this. And these are kits, right? So they're nothing like what you're doing. And I didn't like this one. but I just use wood from my scrap woods from my cabinet behind me.
Uh-huh.
I'm doing this because my wife specifically asked for a specific Valentine's Day gift, and I did a test. I did a test with some maple, and I tried to stain it with some Luthery, that Crimson Guitar guy out in the UK. I got his pink dye, and it didn't go into the maple very well. It's kind of okay, but I'm going to be working with some pink acrylic for the final project. That's not my wife. That's a test piece. So I've got.
It's very nice.
But it's. I never thought of using the erasers on these, by the way, myself. And I just want to thank you. I just never knew there was such a depth to the, or even that a pen maker or fountain pen maker specifically goes to that much depth and work. That's amazing. I highly respect what you're doing.
I'm just not the only one, though. There's a few others. There's a few others that I would consider that do a lot of work. David Broadwell would be the other one. My buddy Jason Olson does a lot of metal work. Greg Hardy does a lot of metal work. And then there's some guys like Ryan Kruzak, who is one hell of a wood pen maker, and he's another pen maker here in Georgia. There's some guys doing some great things. The thing is that not everybody's. There's a guy in Belgium, Garcia Deschat, that he's doing some really crazy things with metal. You know, it just depends on how much you're willing to put into it, is how much you're going to get out.
Okay. Quickly back to the stuff you mentioned, Henry's Simple, and I actually Googled him on my cell phone and looked at some. That's amazing. The silver overlays. Do you get the obviously the pattern has to match on the other side when you bring it.
It sure does.
And you solder it, I gather, at that point.
Yes. Yeah, you silver solder it. So basically, if you look at this, I haven't done these edges here because I have to engrave a line up here. So once I'm done engraving that and engraving that line down there, then I'll be able to take my outline and cut my outline out. At that point, I'm going to have to use forms. There are hand forms, and I'll show you one. Basically, I take this and using a cylindrical object, I'll try to get this to fold around this without doing too much damage. So obviously I'll work my way down to where I'm pretty close to where I want to be. And then using my mallet, because these are all jeweler's tools, I'll get this thing to where it's somewhat round, because you don't ever want to actually solder something when it's completely round, because here's what you're going to do. You're going to create a peak and there's going to be a V there. So basically you want to kind of flatten it. And that's what jewelers do, is they almost flatten their rings or anything. So it's it's almost like a single plane. Okay.
Yeah,
so when you flatten it, then you solder it from the backside, of course. But you have to get that joint to line up. I mean, you have to get it to line up really, really good to where you don't see any. And once you solder it, then you can start hammering it on a cylinder round and to get to where you want it to be so you can finish it.
So it's all done off and then you put it onto the cylinder you want it to finish at.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed this very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will. And thank you very much, Tim, for a brilliant talk. You've given us an insight into a world I think a lot of us didn't have any knowledge of. But I think also quite a few of us have been able to, maybe not me, but quite a few of my members here have been able to show experience in some of the areas that you work in, but you know, not everything. It's been brilliant.
You, my friend.
Our tradition is to raise a glass to you. I know it's a bit early in the day for you to be drinking, but it's a glass of whiskey for me, and to say thank you to you, Tim. And
thanks a lot, Mike.
Raise a glass to the bench to say cheers to the bench.
Cheers.
To
the bench. To the bench.
To the bench.